The restaurant was buzzing with energy, the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation filling every corner. People laughed and chatted over their meals. Servers rushed between tables, and the aroma of fresh food floated through the air. Behind the counter, a young waitress moved carefully from one table to another. She carried trays with drinks, cleared empty plates, and smiled politely at every customer, even when her legs ached and her back felt sore. She had been working at this restaurant for almost a year. It wasn't the fanciest place, but it had regular customers and a steady flow of business. She liked her job most days. It gave her some independence and a chance to be around people. But today something felt different. There was a table of guests that seemed louder than the others, and their voices carried in the air before she even reached them. As she approached, she smiled politely, balancing a tray of drinks carefully in her hands. "Good evening. Can I get you anything to start?" she asked, keeping her voice steady despite the sudden tension she felt in her chest. The guests looked at her and exchanged a quick, amused glance. One of them leaned back in his chair and chuckled. "Well, look at her. Doesn't she look like she just stepped out of some old movie?" His friends laughed, pointing at her uniform and the worn shoes she wore. She forced a small smile, hoping they would take it as a joke. But the laughter only grew louder. One of them whispered something to the others, and she could see their eyes rolling as they made fun of her. She felt a blush rise to her cheeks. She had worked hard to look presentable, to keep her hair neat and her uniform clean, but it didn't matter. In that moment, it felt like nothing she did could stop them from laughing at her. She tried to focus on the task at hand, placing the drinks on the table carefully. "Here are your drinks. Are you ready to order?" she asked, keeping her tone calm and professional. One of them leaned forward and smirked. Wait, before we order, tell me, do you always wear that? It's kind of old-fashioned, isn't it?" His words were sharp, meant to sting. The others laughed again, louder this time, and she felt her stomach tighten. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up beneath her and swallow her whole. She kept her head high and tried to respond politely. "It's the uniform of the restaurant. I don't choose it," she said quietly, hoping to end the conversation. But they didn't stop. "Uniform, huh? Looks more like something a child would wear to school." Another one sneered, smirking as if waiting for the others to join in. The laughter became louder, echoing across the restaurant. Some customers glanced their way, frowning at the rudeness, but most just returned to their meals, too busy to intervene. She felt her hands shake slightly as she reached for the order pad. She kept her voice steady, but inside, she was trembling. She had been humiliated before, but never so openly, never with so many people watching. Her cheeks burned, and she could feel tears threatening to spill over. She had to focus. She had to do her job. She jotted down the orders quickly, trying not to make eye contact with the group. "Okay, your orders will be ready shortly," she said, turning to leave. But one of them called out, "Wait, don't rush off. I want to see you handle this properly." The tone was mocking, and she could hear the smirk in his voice. She nodded, keeping her expression neutral, and moved away. She tried to steady her breathing, telling herself it was just one table, that most people were kind, that she had survived worse. But her confidence had taken a hit, and every step felt heavier than usual. As she moved to another table to serve a dish, she could feel their eyes following her, like invisible fingers pressing against her back. Every movement she made was scrutinized, every smile measured and judged. She dropped a napkin by accident, and one of them laughed, pointing and exaggerating her clumsiness. She picked it up quickly, trying to ignore the sharp sting of embarrassment. The manager noticed the commotion but was busy with the kitchen. He gave her a quick, concerned glance, mouthing a silent "don't worry," but that did little to calm her nerves. She felt trapped, as if the walls of the restaurant were closing in, and the laughter of the table was a weight pressing down on her chest. She kept moving, kept serving, but inside, a storm was brewing. Her mind raced with thoughts. Why do they have to be so cruel? Did I do something wrong? Should I just quit? Each question felt heavier than the last. She was trained to handle rude customers, but this was different. This was personal. This was a kind of cruelty that cut deeper than words. After taking the orders to the kitchen, she leaned against a counter for a brief moment, trying to catch her breath. The restaurant continued its normal rhythm, but she felt disconnected, as if she were outside the world, watching herself move without really participating. She wiped her hands on a towel, feeling the dampness, feeling the weight of the shame pressing on her shoulders. Then, she noticed one of the younger servers watching her. Their eyes were full of concern, silent support. It was a small comfort, but it reminded her she wasn't completely alone. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and decided to keep going. She would not let them see her break down, not completely. She approached the table again with the food, her hands steady now, her voice polite but firm. "Here's your dinner. Please enjoy." She tried to meet their eyes, but they avoided her gaze, pretending to be interested in the menu. She placed the plates gently, making sure not to spill a single drop. But the whispers continued. "Did she really just bring that?" One of them muttered, loud enough for her to hear. She felt a pang of frustration and hurt. She wanted to shout, to tell them off, to make them understand the weight of their words. But she couldn't. Not here. Not now. She was a waitress, and this was part of her job. The rest of the night passed in a blur. She moved from table to table, took orders, refilled drinks, cleared plates, all while the laughter and whispers from that one group haunted her. Every time she passed by, they threw little comments, each one a tiny dagger aimed at her confidence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the table left. She exhaled a long, shaky breath, feeling the tension leave her body in a small, subtle wave. The humiliation had been intense, but it was over, for now. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes briefly, trying to let the feelings pass. In that quiet moment, she realized something important. The world could be cruel, yes, but she had survived this. She had endured it without losing herself completely. And maybe, just maybe, there was a part of her that could rise above it, a part that the world had not yet seen. She wiped her hands, looked around at the restaurant, and noticed the small things she loved. The chatter of friendly customers, the warm light, the smell of fresh bread. Even on a day like this, there were moments of normalcy, moments of hope. And deep inside, she knew that this wasn't the end of her story. Something else, something better, was waiting for her, just beyond the embarrassment and the mocking laughter. As she straightened her uniform and walked toward the back, she felt a spark of determination. She would keep going. She would keep working. And one day, she hoped, she would find a way to show the world the side of her that no one had seen yet. The side of her that could not be mocked. The side of her that was strong, talented, and full of potential. And that spark, small as it was, gave her enough strength to face the rest of the night. After the long and exhausting night, she finally made her way to the small break room at the back of the restaurant. The hum of the kitchen and the chatter of the remaining customers faded into the background. She sank into a chair, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her. The embarrassment from earlier still lingered, like a shadow that refused to leave. Her hands trembled slightly, and she could still hear the laughter echoing in her mind. She stared at the floor, feeling a mixture of frustration and sadness. "Why do people have to be so cruel?" she whispered softly to herself. She didn't expect an answer, and of course none came. The world could be harsh, but she had always believed that somewhere, there was a place where she could be appreciated, a place where her worth wasn't measured by appearances or wealth. Her eyes wandered across the room and landed on the old piano tucked in the corner. It had been there for as long as she could remember, mostly ignored by everyone except the occasional curious child who pressed a key and made a soft, hollow sound. She had always loved that piano. There was something about it that felt alive, something that spoke to her in a way words never could. For years, she had played in secret. She had learned from old recordings, from teachers long gone, from anyone who would take the time to show her a note or a chord. Music had been her refuge, her escape from the hardships and humiliations she faced. When she pressed her fingers to the keys, the rest of the world faded away. Every sorrow, every embarrassment, every harsh word could not reach her there. She stood slowly, the ache in her legs reminding her of the long hours she had just endured. She walked over to the piano and lifted the lid. The keys were worn in places, a testament to years of use. She ran her fingers gently across them, feeling the smooth, cool surface beneath her touch. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. At first, she played softly, almost hesitantly. The notes floated through the quiet break room, filling the space with a delicate, gentle melody. It was simple, but it carried a depth of feeling that words could not capture. Her heart began to calm as she lost herself in the music. The embarrassment of earlier seemed distant now, replaced by a sense of peace she hadn't felt all day. She began to play more confidently, her fingers moving with grace and precision. Each note told a story of resilience, of pain, of hope. She remembered the mocking voices, the sharp comments, the weight of their judgment, and she let all of it flow into the music. The piano became a mirror for her emotions, a place where she could release everything she had bottled up inside. Hours seemed to pass without her noticing. The music grew richer, more expressive, more alive. She experimented with different melodies, mixing soft, melancholic tunes with bursts of joy and energy. She felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before, as if the piano had unlocked a part of her soul that had been hidden away. Occasionally, she would glance toward the door, half expecting someone to walk in and interrupt her. But the break room was empty. The quiet gave her the courage to continue, to explore the music without fear or judgment. Each note was a step away from the humiliation she had endured and a step toward something greater. As she played, memories of her life flashed through her mind. She thought about her childhood, about the struggles and the small victories. She thought about the moments when she had felt unseen, unheard, and unappreciated. And she thought about the small spark inside her that had never died, the spark that loved music more than anything. Her fingers moved faster now, dancing across the keys with confidence. The music swelled and filled the room, powerful yet tender, commanding attention even in the quiet solitude. She realized that she had been holding herself back, afraid of what others might think, afraid that her talent wasn't good enough. But here, alone with the piano, she could be herself fully, without fear or restraint. She closed her eyes again, letting the music guide her. She could feel the rhythm in her chest, the melody in her fingertips. She imagined a crowd listening, not judging, but feeling every note the way she did. She imagined a world where her talent could shine, where her music could touch hearts instead of being hidden away. For the first time that night, she smiled. The shame from earlier didn't vanish completely, but it no longer had the power to control her. She realized that the way others treated her didn't define her worth. Her skill, her passion, and her heart were what truly mattered. The piano had always been her secret, but now she understood its true power. It wasn't just an escape. It was a voice that could speak louder than words, louder than mockery, louder than judgment. It was a voice that could move people, even change their perception of her. She continued to play, letting her emotions flow freely through the keys. She experimented with different styles, mixing soft, gentle notes with powerful, dramatic chords. She allowed herself to feel everything: the pain, the hope, the frustration, and the joy. Each note was a release, a way to let go of the heaviness she carried inside. After what felt like hours, she finally slowed her playing, the final notes lingering in the air like a soft whisper. She sat back for a moment, her hands hovering over the keys, and listened to the silence that followed. The quiet was profound, almost sacred, and it made her heart swell with a quiet pride. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's opinion. She had faced the cruelty of the world that night, and now she had found a way to rise above it. The piano had given her strength, and she knew that this was only the beginning. She stayed there for a while, simply sitting at the piano, letting her heart slow and her thoughts settle. The music had become a part of her, a part that could never be taken away. She realized that no matter what happened at work or in life, she had something that was truly hers, something beautiful, powerful, and uniquely her own. As she finally stood to leave, she felt a quiet determination settle over her. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew one thing. She would not let anyone's cruelty define her. She would carry this strength with her, and someday, the world would hear the music she had kept hidden for so long. She glanced back at the piano one last time that night, a small smile on her lips. The keys were worn and old, but they had given her something priceless. They had reminded her of who she really was, of the talent she had nurtured in secret, and of the courage she possessed even when no one else noticed. With that thought in her heart, she walked out of the break room, her steps lighter, her spirit stronger. The world outside might still be harsh, but she had found a place of power and peace within herself. A place where her music could speak louder than any cruel words, a place where she could be truly free. And in that moment, she knew that someday, somehow, she would let the world hear her music, and it would be unforgettable. The next morning began like any other. The restaurant was busy again, filled with the usual chatter of customers and the clatter of dishes. She arrived early, slipping through the back door quietly, still carrying a faint echo of the music she had played the night before in her mind. The memory of the piano lingered, comforting her in a way nothing else could. She put on her uniform, tying the apron carefully around her waist, and took a deep breath. Today, she told herself, she would face whatever came her way without letting it shake her. The laughter of the previous night still haunted her, but she reminded herself that it belonged to yesterday, and today was a new chance. The restaurant manager was already there, checking the schedule and making notes on a small clipboard. He looked up when she walked in and offered a small smile. "Morning. Ready for another day?" he asked. His voice carried a quiet kindness that made her feel seen, even when the customers were not. She nodded. "Yes, I'm ready," she replied, straightening her back. The morning passed in the usual rhythm. She took orders, refilled drinks, and carried plates from the kitchen to the tables. The hours dragged on, but she tried to keep her mind steady, focusing on her work and on the sense of calm she had felt at the piano the night before. It was just after lunchtime when something unexpected happened. A customer approached the counter, speaking quickly to the manager. "Excuse me," the man said. "We have a group coming in for a small celebration. We were hoping there might be live music." The manager looked around, frowning slightly. "Live music? I don't think we usually have anything planned, but maybe—" His voice trailed off as he glanced toward her. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Well, we do have a piano. Maybe someone could play if they're willing." Her heart skipped a beat. She froze for a moment, unsure if he meant her, or if he was simply making a suggestion out loud. She looked around at the busy restaurant, wondering if she should even consider it. But then the manager's eyes met hers, a small spark of encouragement hidden in the corner of his expression. She swallowed hard, her throat dry. I can play," she said quietly, almost to herself. She didn't want to draw attention, but she also couldn't ignore the chance. The opportunity to share her music, even just a little, felt like a doorway opening that she couldn't walk away from. The manager smiled, nodding gently. "That's wonderful. Why don't you take a seat at the piano and see what you can do?" Her hands shook slightly as she approached the piano. It was the same old piano she had played the night before, worn and familiar. She touched the keys gently, feeling the smooth surface beneath her fingertips. She took a deep breath, remembering the way her music had felt alive and free when she played alone. She closed her eyes and began softly, letting the first notes drift through the restaurant. The sound was gentle, almost tentative at first, but it caught the attention of nearby tables. Conversations slowed, and customers began to listen without even realizing it. Her fingers moved carefully, each note carrying a quiet emotion, a hint of vulnerability, and a spark of hope. As she grew more confident, the melody expanded. She added richness, texture, and feeling, letting the music rise and fall like waves. The gentle rhythm began to fill the restaurant, drawing attention from even the farthest corners. People paused mid-bite, mid-sentence, as if the piano itself demanded their focus. She glanced at the celebrating group that had requested the music. Their eyes were wide with surprise, admiration spreading across their faces. They whispered to each other, nodding and smiling. She felt a spark of courage grow inside her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment she had been waiting for. A chance to show the world a part of herself she had kept hidden for so long. The mocking table from the previous night had not returned, but the energy of the room was enough to make her nerves buzz. She pushed aside any lingering fear, focusing only on the piano and the story she could tell through the music. Each note became a word, each chord a sentence, weaving a narrative of resilience and beauty. As she played, she noticed the restaurant staff glancing over, their eyes softening as they listened. Even the manager stopped what he was doing, leaning against the counter with a quiet smile, watching her performance unfold. She felt a sense of connection she had never experienced before, the music bridging the gap between her private world and the public space of the restaurant. The melody shifted, becoming more dynamic, more confident. Her fingers moved with precision, almost as if they had a mind of their own. She felt a rush of energy, the kind that comes when someone is fully immersed in their passion. She had spent so many years hiding this talent, playing in secret, afraid of judgment or rejection. But now, with every note she struck, she felt a sense of liberation. Customers began to murmur softly, praising the music, nodding in appreciation. Some even stopped their conversations entirely, letting the sound wash over them. She could feel the atmosphere changing, the restaurant no longer just a place for food, but a space transformed by music. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling the warmth of the audience's attention. Her confidence grew with each passing minute, and the music became bolder, more expressive. She explored different styles, mixing gentle, tender notes with powerful, dramatic chords. She felt alive in a way she never had while working in the shadows. Time seemed to slow. The outside world disappeared, leaving only her, the piano, and the people who were listening. She felt the emotions she had carried for so long, embarrassment, fear, frustration, beginning to melt away, replaced by a sense of pride and fulfillment. Her talent was no longer hidden. It was being seen, heard, and appreciated. She noticed the manager's eyes shining with pride, the staff exchanging glances of amazement. Even the celebrating group leaned in closer, completely captivated. Her heart swelled with a quiet joy. She had faced the possibility of humiliation, but now she was experiencing something entirely different. Recognition, respect, and genuine admiration. By the time she reached the final notes of her piece, the restaurant was completely silent. The music lingered in the air, heavy with emotion and beauty. Every person present seemed touched, moved in a way that transcended ordinary conversation. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, savoring the sound she had created. A soft, tentative applause began, spreading gradually throughout the restaurant. The manager clapped, the staff clapped, and soon even the customers joined in. She opened her eyes, looking around in surprise. The reaction was overwhelming, filling her with a mixture of disbelief and joy. She had expected a polite acknowledgement, maybe a few compliments. Instead, she had received something far greater, an affirmation of her worth, her talent, and her courage. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she let a smile spread across her face, feeling a warmth that had been missing for so long. She realized in that moment that the humiliation from the night before no longer had power over her. She had turned a moment of shame into something extraordinary, something unforgettable. The manager approached her after the applause, his expression full of admiration. "That was incredible," he said quietly. "You have a gift and people can feel it. Don't ever hide it again." She nodded, her heart still racing. She didn't need to speak. The music had said everything she wanted to say. The celebrating group approached her, offering heartfelt thanks and compliments. "We didn't know the restaurant had such talent," one of them said, smiling genuinely. That was amazing. Their words felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, warming the coldness left by yesterday's cruelty. As she returned to her regular tasks, she noticed a subtle shift in the restaurant's energy. People spoke more kindly, smiled more openly, and treated her with a new level of respect. Even small gestures like a customer offering a tip with genuine gratitude felt significant. She realized that her music had not only changed how others saw her, but also how she saw herself. By the end of her shift, she felt exhausted but exhilarated. The day had begun like any other, but it had ended with a revelation. Her talent, her passion, and her courage had turned a normal day at work into something unforgettable. She had faced the possibility of fear and failure and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever. As she closed the restaurant for the night, she walked past the piano one last time. Her fingers itched to play again, to let the music flow freely and completely. She promised herself that she would not let this moment be the only one. She would continue to play, to grow, and to share her music whenever she could. The experience had taught her something important. Talent and passion are powerful tools, and sometimes, all it takes is one opportunity to reveal them. She had been given a chance and she had taken it. The memory of the applause, the smiles, and the admiration would stay with her forever. A reminder that courage, even in the face of fear, could change everything. And in that quiet, lingering moment, she knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, and perhaps more people who would doubt her. But she had found her voice, and she had found the power to use it. The piano, the music, and her own determination would carry her forward, ready for whatever came next. The restaurant was unusually quiet that evening, a calm settling over the usual chatter. Even the clatter of dishes seemed softer, as if everyone was subconsciously waiting for something to happen. She arrived early, slipping quietly through the back door, feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She had played earlier in the day and seen the reactions of the customers, but tonight felt different. Something in the air told her that this was a moment she could not ignore. She put on her uniform carefully, smoothing the apron over her chest, tying it tightly at the waist. Her hands trembled slightly, but this was not fear. It was excitement, a small pulse of energy that ran through her body, reminding her that she was about to do something she loved. She took a deep breath and stepped out onto the restaurant floor, moving with the practiced grace of someone who had spent countless hours serving food, balancing trays, and keeping calm under pressure. The manager noticed her as she arrived. He gave her a small nod and whispered, "I think tonight could be special." She returned the nod, a mixture of curiosity and determination in her eyes. Special. That was exactly what she wanted. She wanted to take the music that had lived quietly inside her for years and show it to the world, to transform something ordinary into something extraordinary. The evening crowd started to trickle in. Families, couples, and friends took their seats, ordering drinks and chatting quietly. She moved between the tables, delivering orders with a smile, all the while feeling the familiar hum of nerves in her stomach. But she welcomed it. It reminded her that something was about to happen, that this moment was real and full of possibilities. Suddenly, one of the regular waiters approached her with a small note from a customer at a corner table. The note asked if there could be some live music during dinner. She glanced at the piano tucked in the far corner and then back at the note, her pulse quickening. This was her chance. She nodded silently, taking a deep breath, and walked toward the piano. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a brief moment, remembering the first time she had played alone in the back room. The memory of that quiet, private space came to her, of how the music had lifted the weight of embarrassment and shame from the previous night. She closed her eyes, letting herself feel that same calm, that same connection to the piano that had always been her secret refuge. She began to play softly, the first notes delicate and hesitant, like a whisper in the quiet restaurant. But even in those first few moments, the sound began to attract attention. Conversation slowed, the hum of the kitchen softened, and eyes turned toward her without anyone realizing why. Her fingers danced across the keys, careful and precise, but also filled with the emotions she had kept hidden for so long. The music grew richer, more confident, more expressive. She allowed herself to feel every note, letting the melody carry her emotions out into the room. The gentle rhythm shifted into more powerful chords, the notes rising and falling like waves that carried the listeners along. People began to lean forward, their eyes widening in surprise as they absorbed the unexpected beauty of her performance. She glanced around and noticed the expressions of those at the tables nearest her. Faces that had been preoccupied with food and conversation were now lifted with wonder. Couples held hands more tightly, friends nodded in quiet admiration, and even children stopped fidgeting, their eyes glued to the piano. The atmosphere had changed completely. The restaurant was no longer just a place to eat. It had become a stage for something magical. Her confidence grew with every note. She no longer played hesitantly. Her fingers moved fluidly across the keys, each chord stronger, each melody more expressive. The music seemed to fill every corner of the room, reaching into hearts without a single word. Even the kitchen staff paused, listening from behind the counter, unable to ignore the sound that transformed their everyday work into something extraordinary. She could feel the energy of the audience building, a subtle electricity that ran through the air. The music was no longer just for her. It belonged to everyone in the room. Each person absorbed it differently, but all felt the same quiet awe. Some had tears in their eyes, others wore expressions of astonishment, and a few simply sat in silence, letting the notes wash over them. At one table, she noticed a group of young adults who had entered joking and loud. They had been ready to make a scene, but now they were captivated, their heads nodding slightly to the rhythm, their earlier energy replaced by awe. Even she was surprised by the power her music held, by the way it could transform a space and the people within it so completely. She shifted the melody, moving into a section that was slower, more reflective. Her fingers lingered on the keys, drawing out long, lingering notes that seemed to echo the emotions she had felt the night before. Embarrassment, shame, fear, but now replaced with hope, pride, and strength. The contrast was striking, and she could see it reflected in the faces around her. There was a sense of shared experience, as if the music were telling a story that everyone understood without needing words. She glanced at the manager, who was watching from the side with an expression of admiration. He caught her eye and gave a small nod of encouragement. She smiled faintly in return, feeling a rush of warmth. His support meant more than she could put into words. She realized that moments like this, moments when people could feel deeply, when music could touch hearts, were rare, and she was fortunate to be experiencing it. The music began to swell, growing more dynamic, more powerful. She allowed herself to become fully immersed, her emotions guiding the performance. She felt joy, courage, and strength all at once, and she let it pour into the piano. The notes seemed to leap from the keys, carrying her energy out into the room, touching everyone present. Customers whispered to each other, sharing their astonishment quietly. "This is incredible," one said. "I've never heard anything like this." Another nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. The atmosphere had completely transformed. People who had entered thinking they were just coming for dinner were now part of something extraordinary. The restaurant had become a shared space of beauty and emotion, all thanks to her courage and talent. She noticed one elderly man at the corner table, his eyes closed as he absorbed every note. She felt a wave of warmth in her chest, realizing that the music had the power to reach people in ways words never could. For some, it was a comfort. For others, a surprise. But for everyone, it was a moment they would remember. As she played, she remembered the humiliating table from the night before. The sting of their laughter was still in her memory, but it no longer had the power to hurt her. She had transformed that energy into something beautiful. The music was her response, her voice, her way of showing that she was more than their mockery. Her final notes rang out, powerful yet tender, filling the restaurant with a quiet reverence. The sound lingered in the air, wrapping around every person like a gentle embrace. For a moment, there was complete silence, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then, slowly, Applause began to ripple through the room. The clapping grew louder, spreading from table to table. Some people stood, others remained seated, tears in their eyes, faces glowing with admiration. She felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of relief, pride, and overwhelming joy. The music had worked. It had silenced the doubts, the fear, and even the memory of shame, replacing them with something far more powerful: connection and awe. The manager approached her, clapping softly. "That was unbelievable," he said. "You have a gift. Don't ever hide it." She nodded, unable to find words. Her heart was still racing, but in the best way possible. Customers came up one by one, offering words of thanks, praise, and admiration. Some shook her hand, others simply smiled, their eyes full of appreciation. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had gone from being invisible, even mocked, to being celebrated and recognized, all because she had dared to share her talent. As the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, she felt a profound change within herself. She had faced fear and embarrassment, and through music, had transformed not only her own experience, but the experience of everyone around her. She realized that talent, courage, and passion could create moments of true magic, moments that people would carry with them long after the music had stopped. That night, as she closed the restaurant and walked past the piano, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She touched the keys gently, remembering the journey from private practice in the back room to the captivated audience in the dining room. The music had not only revealed her talent, it had revealed her strength. She knew, deep in her heart, that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more moments of fear, and more opportunities to shine. But tonight had proven something vital. She had a voice, she had talent, and she had the courage to share it with the world. And that was more than enough. The evening had taken on a life of its own. The restaurant, which had been filled with the usual chatter and the clatter of dishes, had transformed into something entirely different. People no longer focused on their meals alone. Their attention was drawn to the music that filled the room. Every note she played seemed to ripple outward, touching every listener in a way that felt personal and profound. She sat at the piano, her fingers still moving over the keys even after the last piece had ended. The applause had faded into soft murmurs, but she could feel the energy in the room. It was electric, alive, and waiting. She realized that something had changed. People no longer saw her just as a waitress. They saw the music, the talent, the passion that radiated from her. A young couple at a nearby table leaned toward each other, whispering with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never experienced anything like it." The man nodded, a small smile spreading across his face. "It's incredible. She's amazing." Other customers spoke quietly among themselves, sharing their astonishment. Some shook their heads in disbelief, as if trying to process what they had just heard. One older woman dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, tears glistening in the dim restaurant light. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "I haven't felt moved like that in years." The manager approached her again, a mixture of pride and amazement in his eyes. "You've done something extraordinary tonight," he said quietly. "People will remember this. I've never seen the restaurant so alive." She nodded, still catching her breath. Words felt unnecessary. The music had spoken for her. She glanced around and noticed that even the staff were different now. The servers who had worked alongside her for years looked at her with newfound respect. One of them approached quietly and whispered, "I had no idea. You're incredible." She smiled faintly, feeling warmth in her chest. For so long, she had felt invisible, underestimated, even mocked. But tonight, her talent had given her a voice that could not be ignored. A man at the far end of the room stood up slowly, clapping with genuine admiration. "Please," he said loudly, "play another piece. I don't think any of us can get enough of this." A ripple of agreement spread across the tables, and soon, more voices joined in, asking for more music, praising her talent. She felt a surge of nervous excitement but also a deep sense of joy. She nodded, taking a deep breath before letting her fingers glide over the keys once more. This time, the music was more daring, more expressive. She played with confidence, exploring new melodies, letting the emotions she had carried for so long pour into the room. The audience leaned in closer, fully captivated by every note. Children stopped fidgeting and listened intently, some with wide-eyed amazement. Couples held each other, letting the music become part of their shared experience. Friends nodded in quiet appreciation, and even those who had been distracted earlier were now fully present, absorbed by the beauty unfolding before them. She played longer than she had planned, lost in the music and in the energy of the room. The applause from the previous piece had given her courage, and she let that courage flow through her fingers. Each note told a story, of struggle, of resilience, of hope. Each chord carried emotion, a message that went beyond words. People's reactions were more than she could have imagined. Some were moved to tears, their faces soft with emotion. Others smiled, eyes shining with admiration and respect. She noticed a young man near the front, his expression a mixture of surprise and awe, whispering to the person beside him, "I never expected this. She's phenomenal." Even the manager, who had seen many performers over the years, looked stunned. "I've never experienced anything like this in this restaurant," he admitted quietly. "You've changed the atmosphere completely. Everyone is captivated." She felt a lump in her throat, not from fear or embarrassment this time, but from the overwhelming sense of validation. For so long, she had hidden this part of herself, afraid that the world would dismiss it or ridicule her. But tonight, she realized that her talent had the power to change perceptions, to move people, to leave a lasting impression. The music built to a crescendo, powerful yet controlled, a surge of emotion that seemed to fill every corner of the room. People leaned forward, their attention rapt, as if hanging on every note. She could feel their hearts responding, a silent connection forming between her and the audience, a shared experience that transcended words. When the final chord resonated through the restaurant, there was a moment of absolute silence. Every person present seemed caught in the aftermath of the music, savoring the feeling that lingered in the air. Then, slowly, applause began. A ripple at first, then growing louder and louder, spreading from table to table. The sound was deafening, not just in volume, but in emotion. People stood, clapping, some cheering, others whistling softly. The energy in the room was electric, a wave of admiration and respect that washed over her like nothing she had ever felt. She blinked rapidly, overwhelmed by the response, but a smile spread across her face, genuine and unrestrained. The manager approached once more, eyes shining. "You've done something extraordinary," he said again, his voice filled with emotion. "People will remember this night for a long time. You have a gift, and you've shared it beautifully." Customers came forward, one by one, to offer their congratulations. Some shook her hand, others simply smiled, tears in their eyes. "Thank you," one woman said softly. "You've made this evening unforgettable." Another man nodded, saying, "I've never heard anything so moving. You're incredible." She felt a wave of emotion rising within her. For so long, she had doubted herself, feared judgment, and hidden her talent. But tonight, she had faced that fear and allowed her music to speak. The response of the audience, the applause, the smiles, the tears, they were proof that her gift had power, that it could touch hearts in ways she had never imagined. As she stepped away from the piano, the applause continued, echoing in her ears. She felt a deep sense of pride and fulfillment, a feeling that went beyond any praise or recognition. She had transformed a normal evening into something extraordinary, simply by being herself and sharing her passion. The manager clapped her on the shoulder, whispering, "You've inspired everyone tonight. Don't ever forget that." She nodded, overwhelmed but grateful. The humiliation of the past seemed distant now, replaced by the overwhelming affirmation of her talent and courage. Even the youngest staff members looked at her differently. They had seen her work quietly, day after day, and now they understood the depth of her skill and dedication. One of them whispered, "I had no idea. You're amazing." She smiled softly, realizing that her talent had not only touched customers, but also those who worked alongside her every day. The evening wound down slowly. The restaurant returned to a calmer rhythm, but the energy from her performance lingered. Customers continued to speak of the music, sharing their astonishment and appreciation. Some lingered longer, reluctant to leave, savoring the magic of the night. She cleaned up quietly, her hands moving methodically, but her mind replayed the events of the evening over and over. The applause, the admiration, the sense of connection. All of it had filled a part of her heart that had long been empty. She realized that her music was not just a talent. It was a bridge between herself and the world, a way to share her emotions and touch lives in ways words never could. As she prepared to leave for the night, she glanced once more at the piano. The keys, worn and familiar, seemed to glow softly in the dim light. She ran her fingers across them gently, a silent thank you for the gift they had given her. The gift of expression, of courage, and of connection. Walking out of the restaurant, she felt lighter than she had in years. The fear, the embarrassment, the self-doubt, they were still there, but they no longer held power over her. She had faced them, transformed them, and shared something beautiful with the world. And that was more than she had ever imagined possible. She knew that her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, and perhaps more people who would not understand her. But tonight had proven something important. When she embraced her talent, when she allowed herself to shine, she could move hearts, inspire people, and transform ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. And with that realization in her heart, she walked into the night, a quiet smile on her lips, ready for whatever came next. The days after that unforgettable night were different. The restaurant felt alive in a new way, and so did she. Every time she stepped onto the floor, she noticed the subtle changes. The way customers smiled more warmly, the way staff treated her with genuine respect, and the quiet sense of admiration that seemed to follow her steps. She carried herself differently, not because she wanted attention, but because she finally felt the weight of her own worth. She still worked the same long hours, taking orders, refilling drinks, and carrying plates to tables. But something inside her had shifted. The music had unlocked a part of her soul that had long been hidden, and now it radiated outward in everything she did. Even the smallest gestures, pouring a drink, offering a kind word, or carrying a tray with care, felt more meaningful, infused with the confidence she had gained from sharing her gift. Word spread quickly about the performance. People came from other neighborhoods, curious to hear the waitress who could play the piano like an angel. Some were skeptical at first, expecting ordinary background music, but soon they were captivated, moved in ways they hadn't anticipated. She was no longer just a server. She was a performer, an artist, a storyteller. One evening, as she prepared for her shift, the manager approached with a broad smile. "There's a local event coming up," he said. "They're looking for performers, and I suggested you. They're eager to hear someone with your talent. Would you like to play?" Her heart skipped a beat. An official event? A real audience beyond the restaurant? She had dreamed of this secretly for years, but never imagined it would come true so soon. She nodded, swallowing the nervous excitement rising in her chest. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'd love to." The next few days were a blur of preparation. She practiced every spare moment, experimenting with new pieces, refining melodies, and letting her emotions flow into the music. She wanted this performance to be perfect, not because she sought perfection itself, but because she wanted to share her heart with the audience, to let them feel what she felt when she played. Finally, the day arrived. The event hall was filled with people, buzzing with chatter and expectation. She carried herself calmly, hiding the flutter in her stomach, and walked to the piano set up at the front. The spotlight was warm, the audience silent, waiting for her first note. She took a deep breath, remembering all the times she had doubted herself, all the nights she had played in secret, and the incredible response she had received at the restaurant. She pressed the first key gently, letting it resonate. The sound filled the hall, soft but commanding attention. She continued, letting the music unfold naturally, each note carefully chosen, each chord infused with emotion. The audience leaned in, caught by the depth and beauty of the melodies, completely absorbed in the story she was telling through her music. Her confidence grew as she played, and with it, the music grew richer, more vibrant, and more expressive. She allowed herself to feel everything she had bottled up, the fear, the shame, the hope, the joy, and poured it into the piano. The notes danced, soared, and settled in ways that spoke directly to the hearts of the listeners. As the performance continued, she noticed faces illuminated by awe and wonder. Some had tears in their eyes, others were smiling softly, and a few simply closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. She realized that the music was connecting everyone in the hall, forming an unspoken bond between her and the audience, a shared experience of beauty and emotion. Halfway through the performance, she glanced briefly at the audience and noticed a familiar face. A customer from the restaurant who had attended one of her earlier performances. He nodded, a small smile on his lips, silently encouraging her. She felt a surge of warmth and courage, letting it guide her fingers as she explored more intricate melodies and dramatic chords. The audience was completely captivated now. There were moments of hushed silence, followed by bursts of applause after particularly moving passages. She felt the energy of the crowd as if it were a wave, lifting her, carrying her through the music. She had never experienced anything like it before. For the first time, she understood the true power of her talent. Not just to entertain, but to inspire, to heal, and to create moments that would linger in memory long after the final note had faded. By the time she reached the final piece, her hands were flying across the keys with precision and grace. The music soared, filling every corner of the hall with its beauty. She played with everything she had, pouring her heart and soul into each note. When the last chord reverberated, it hung in the air like a breath held, a delicate echo of all the emotions she had shared. There was a moment of absolute silence, as if the audience itself were stunned by the power of what they had just heard. Then, slowly, the applause began, hesitant at first, then swelling into a wave of cheers and clapping that filled the hall. People rose to their feet, some whistling, some cheering, all showing their admiration for the woman who had transformed the event with her music. She stood up, her heart pounding, tears brimming in her eyes. She had never felt anything like this, the overwhelming sense of recognition, respect, and validation. The journey from being humiliated as a waitress to standing here in front of a captivated audience was almost too much to comprehend. And yet, she felt an immense gratitude for every step that had led her here, even the painful ones. After the applause settled, the event organizer approached her, a broad smile on their face. "That was extraordinary," they said. "We've never had a performer like you. People will remember this night forever." She nodded, too emotional to speak, and instead let a small, humble smile convey her gratitude. As she left the stage and returned backstage, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. She had faced fear, self-doubt, and embarrassment, and yet she had transformed them into something beautiful. Her talent had been recognized, celebrated, and shared in a way she had never imagined possible. Over the following days, her life began to change. Invitations to perform at local events, small concerts, and gatherings started to arrive. People wanted to hear her play, to feel the emotion she poured into her music. She still worked at the restaurant, but her perspective had shifted. No longer did she feel invisible or undervalued. Now she walked with quiet confidence, knowing that she had something special to offer the world. She continued to practice, refine her skills, and explore new pieces. Music was no longer a secret refuge. It was her voice, her expression, and her bridge to others. And every time she played, she remembered the moment she had first shared her talent, the night she had been humiliated, and the way she had transformed fear into courage. One evening, as she played at the restaurant for a smaller crowd, she noticed a young girl watching her with wide eyes. The girl leaned toward her mother and whispered, "I want to play piano like her." She felt a lump in her throat, realizing that her music had inspired someone else, just as she had once been inspired by others before her. That was a new kind of reward, one that went beyond applause and recognition. A reminder that sharing her talent could ripple outward, touching lives she might never even know. Her manager noticed her expression and smiled knowingly. "You've done more than entertain," he said softly. "You've inspired. You've changed lives." She nodded, quietly humbled. She realized that every moment of doubt, every night of practice, every hardship she had endured had led her to this point. It had all been worth it. She continued her journey, performing at events, playing at the restaurant, and sharing her music with anyone willing to listen. Each performance was different, each audience unique, but the power of the music remained constant. It was no longer just a part of her life. It had become her purpose, her gift, and her way of connecting with the world. Looking back, she could hardly believe how far she had come. From the night of humiliation to the applause of countless strangers, she had learned that courage, persistence, and the willingness to share her gifts could transform life in ways that seemed impossible. She had faced fear, embraced her talent, and allowed herself to shine. And in doing so, she had inspired others, touched hearts, and created unforgettable moments of beauty. And so, every time she sat at the piano, whether for one listener or 100, she played with the same passion, honesty, and courage that had brought her this far. The music was no longer just an escape. It was a celebration of who she was, a testament to the strength she had discovered within herself, and a gift she could share with the world. Her journey was far from over, but she no longer feared the future. She knew that as long as she played, as long as she allowed herself to be brave and authentic, she could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and continue to touch lives with the beauty of her music. And in that truth, she found a deep, lasting joy, a joy that no humiliation could ever take away, a joy born from the courage to embrace her talent, the love for her music, and the power of believing in herself.